We do Marilyn Monroe and Elvis Presley, please.
You're so funny. I don't know. Does anybody care about dead people anymore? I don't know.
I love the slant, I never expected it to be so heavy. And I've read in our 501 that when it's a kind of sensuality in her writing. It's thick and pretty intense, deep. And it so suits with her character.
Okay, so we'll start with Marilyn Monroe. So those of you that are in the beginning course or that are in the certification course, the slant is a pretty important piece. And I find that between the slant and the size of the middle zone, you kind of capture the essence of whether someone's introverted, extroverted, how they're going to be socially, and how emotional they are. And so I'll take Joanne. You're in Germany, Joanne?
Yes.
Hi, how are you? Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
So tell me about the slant. You got Marilyn Monroe. You're kind of new at this, about 3 or 4 months. Describe her.
3 or 4 months. This less than 2 weeks.
Perfect. Then you're the perfect person to choose. I'll put you on the hot seat.
Yeah.
So the slant's pretty simple. Is this person introverted or extroverted on the screen?
Extroverted.
Yeah. And that's just from the slant to the right. Now, the other thing which you'll learn in time is the middle zone. And so it's interesting because some people that slant up and down, like straight up and down, they can be really extroverted. They have a really big middle zone. Mm-hmm. And so it's almost a dichotomy, and it's kind of confusing. And it took me honestly years to get that distinction between slant and middle zone. But back to Marilyn, I of course didn't meet her because she was gone before I got here. But she's still famous and worldwide. But she does have a good self-esteem, a small handwriting, which is interesting because it's great focus. And that sometimes makes people the illusion that you're introverted, even though you're extroverted. So I think, Joanne, you're correct. She is extroverted, but surprisingly great focus and surprisingly great self-esteem. I mean, really amazing is how you think, okay, she just kind of got lucky, but she was not only beautiful, but she obviously had talent and discipline and the ability to become a pretty worldwide movie star.
I'm looking at her eyes now because I'm learning a lot about the letter I. And it's because it's going more to it's pretty loopy. This one, there's an I next to I stay of I stay. Yeah, it's the, how many lines down? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 lines down. Does it, I'm still trying to understand the mother and the father and how much that comes into play with the I loop. Is that, yes, that's where I'm looking. Can you tell me a little bit what that I means? As far as mother, father, self-esteem, ego.
Sure. So the self-esteem is part of what we consider ego or space. Mm-hmm. So the personal pronoun I, and there's entire books written on this, by the way. They're not always correct, but we break it down into like 4 or 5 different features. The weight of the I, especially if they learned English in America or English, English UK, because that means me. So if you're a native English speaker, I means me and the self. If you're a native French speaker, it's je, je. Does that make sense? So the I may not have as much weight if they didn't grow up writing the I. So that's a distinction most of you probably never heard because it's not on their recordings. So that's what I've noticed is if they're a native American speaker, all that I-ness or the me means I. And so that's why it's ego. The second piece of confidence is the signature and the size of the signature. All that's to do with self-confidence and basically space. And I say space is you walk into a room and do I own the space? Do I walk down the hall? Do I expect people to move out of my way or do I move aside? Like this sort of confidence. And it's not self-esteem, it's state-related confidence. Like a sports player has confidence when they're about to shoot the ball versus someone who doesn't. So it's a state and it's an ego and it's important and we need that. People are afraid to make their ego bigger because they don't want to turn into a narcissistic jerk. However, the opposite of that is a wallflower. And so we want somewhere in the middle. So in this situation, she has high upper zones. The I is very healthy. And then, of course, the T-bars are high. So you have 2, the high T-bar, good self-esteem, and you've got good personal pronoun I. Okay. So that's just the size.
Can you really tell about your parents as well in the I, or because I don't hear you speak much about that?
It's because there's me and there's Andre McNichol, and literally we're opposite on deficient. Well, that's not true. So there's books that say the upper loop is the dad, and there's other books that say the bottom loop is the dad.
Exactly.
So what gives? And these are all fairly seasoned experts. And so as I was coming up, I was like, this is really incongruent. The other thing is I found is when I went and said, okay, you got a problem with your dad, about 25% of the time the person would say, no, it's my mom. She's a bitch. And so I was dead wrong. I mean, I hate being dead wrong. And if I'm dead wrong, there's something wrong with the system. And that's why most of you don't have that dead wrongness, because I've taken out all the stuff in the course that makes you wrong. And Elaine's shaking her head because she understands, because there's so much stuff in the universe that's incorrect in graphology. You really have to focus on the things that are correct. And we have 26 letters in the alphabet, and we have hundreds of languages from that. So you don't need more than 100 primary traits. You don't need 1,000 traits. They can't all be accurate. You just need to assemble them better. So in that aspect, what I decided, go ahead, John.
I'm so sorry. If I want to learn to do a healthy eye, because I'm still trying to play with it, I don't have the loop on either side. It's just I have the loop on the top, but I have nothing either side. My mom's deceased and I don't have a relationship with my dad. So I'm wondering, is that just normal for me? Or should I be trying to do it some other way? I don't know how to make my eye.
That's a complicated question. So let me explain, A, for the rest of the people, sort of the eye theory, so you're not confused. B, if you don't have any issue around your parents, you don't have to do anything with your eye. So there's no ideal way to do it. There was a lady in Dallas that insisted everybody printed their eye, like / print. That was her rule. Everybody needs to get away from the dominance of their parents, because all parents are bad and they need to be independent. I think that's a really bad rule to make everyone fall into that category, because some people have great relationships with their parents. Some people live with their parents till they're 80. Like, why would you say that for everybody? Likewise, if both your parents aren't around, Joanne, you could print your eye and you're not losing anything because you don't have a strong relationship with them. Okay. Mm-hmm. It doesn't affect you much. But the bigger question is, why would you make that change if there was an impending issue? And that really falls under the graphotherapy banner. So the answer is, for you, there's no ideal way, unless that core part of your issue is somehow causing issues, is causing a problem. Maybe if you have babies, you're like, okay, I want to duplicate this connection with babies, but I have no understanding whether that eye relates to children. So let me finish the concept. Is most books say that the first loop is the mother and the second loop's the father. And that is kind of the direction I took. I said, okay, if you can watch them write the eye, if you can actually watch them and observe them write it, the first loop that comes out of their hand is the mother. So the first person you know as a baby is your mom, because you're in her room for 9 months, okay? And then you get to know your dad. So I think that those 25% of people that said you're dead wrong, I simply didn't know whether they're writing it with the top loop first or the bottom loop first. That is my way to reconcile this sort of a schism within the community of first or second loop. So you guys give that a shot and let me know if that's what you guys have found out. I have no strong attachment to whether I'm right or wrong on this, but I was definitely do not agree it's always mother or always father. I just found that not to be true. And I think it must have something to do with the first or second loop. Great. So Elaine has a question about Marilyn Monroe's writing and vanity. So it's interesting. Vanity is a trait that I've begun to understand a little bit more with not only with people around me, but it's one of the traits of successful people, but it's also one of the traits of really annoying people. So there's this mix of everybody, not everybody, a lot of people are sensitive to whether people like me, people respect me, and then the violation of that respect can absolutely ruin a relationship. And so the taller the T and D stems, the more of that sense of concern about reputation. At the same time, it's normally a good thing because they want you to respect them. They're also really motivated by status, or as Joan would say, status, the English way, status. And that's a huge motivation. Like if you think about all the multi-level companies, even newspapers, even the Academy Awards, that trophy, that public recognition of your accomplishments will motivate people for years. So whether it's an Academy Award or the Pulitzer Prize or something, that status is highly motivating, and people that have a lot of pride and self-respect are highly motivated by that. So we see that in Marilyn Monroe's, which is also recognition. And so if you understand how somebody's motivated, you're more likely to be able to coach them better, to manage them better, even have a better relationship, because you understand that element of respect, RESPCT, is really, really important. So very good. And thank you for pulling us back. I do want to sort of stick to a similar topic, but as we move through, it's very hard not to navigate to other traits, because we're, especially those of us that have been doing this a long time, you're mixing all this stuff together. But we'll be mindful there are people that have been here 2 weeks who want to also kind of bring it down. And that's one thing the silver class does, is we break it down, is especially when I'm coaching you, is like, where did you see that? Where did you see that? How did that primary trait? Because I can tell you that if you ask me where I see something or why I say it, I can always tell you exactly the letter plus this thing plus that thing. And I can tell you I've met dozens of teachers that'll be like, well, it's a feeling about it. And you'll never get that answer from me because I have no feelings. I had my empathy gland removed years ago. I have no use for them whatsoever. Therefore, I don't have any feelings, and it's not an intuitive science. Unfortunately, you guys are all muted because I do like to hear the laughter. That makes me really happy when I get the validation of laughter and jokes like that. So I'm sorry I didn't get the benefit of hearing the laughter on my punchline there. Okay, so slant. Elaine, you are kind of a veteran here because you've been around the silver course. This is Kennedy, which I heard you dated him when you were younger. Is that true, Elaine?
Oh, I'm sure.
No, I'm not that old.
I tease. You know what? I call Doc Grayson 180. You can get a little bit of. I'm not picking on him anymore because he's in the hospital. But you should love the fact that I'm picking on you.
I was a kid at the time. Okay. Yeah. So
Slant.
we were talking about
what's slant? Eyeball the slant. Is it A, B, F, A, D, E, E plus?
I would think it would be E plus.
E plus. Joanne, you have a vote.
DE. I would have said Marilyn was CD and this is DE, but I have no idea.
Yeah, I think D is my first guess, Joanne. So you and I are parallel on that. Could even be E plus. Pooja, did you measure this?
Yeah, E plus DE, yeah.
So E plus DE, awesome. And now again, we're eyeballing this, which is not really a good idea if you're a beginner. However, it's like, man, it's definitely slanted. Remember, we can only measure upstrokes. Therefore, if somebody prints, it's illusion because you're like, oh, he's going backwards because those are the downstrokes going backwards. So that's one of the things that as you use the gauge and you follow the procedure, you realize, oh, what I think is this way, that's all the downstrokes confusing me. I just want to measure the upstrokes. So you're probably right, DE plus. I mean, highly passionate guy for sure. I was very intrigued by the big loop in the D. I thought that was a really unusual trait for such an interesting leader. He probably had a lot of pain, especially with criticism, but then again, he used it and became president, you know, and got himself killed. So a lot of negatives with, you know, if he, I don't know, I would have to argue he wasn't paranoid that they were after him because they were. So you really can't say that it was paranoid. Pooja, that's a good sample. Is there anything else anybody wants to say about it?
I would like to add, I couldn't see anything in the lower zone. In fact, very little bit of it's there in the lower zone. The main handwriting is only in the upper zone. So as we are discussing zones also, what do you have to say on that upper zone? There are a lot of new people here will be getting confused. What is upper zone all about? Is it philosophy? Is it religious? How do you explain it? Because it still is a little struggle for people to understand. How do you express the philosophies and how do you say that?
Sure. So that kind of falls under the generalization or the zones of theory. You know, like you have music theory in you know, piano class. It's part of the theory. So once you're saying the theory, everything blends together better. But you can learn individual notes on a piano and you can probably play a song. But if you want to really jump from song to song, you need to understand the theory. So that's part of the theory, meaning upper zone philosophy. Middle zone today, lower zone is physical, sex drive, physical drives, and then also left and right. So it also parallels with some of NLP timeline therapy. Like there's lots of mental models that parallel to future, past, etc. And so as you think about that, it's really useful as you get better when you find traits you've never seen before, especially in India. One of the things I noticed about that audience is if there is an exception, they will find it. They're like, I have a doubt. Like, what if I do this? But I've seen this one trait in my signature and I have to know what it means. And you're the expert, so you have to know what it means. If it's not in that 99 or 150 primary traits, I'm probably going to have an educated guess. And I'm going to guess based on theory, meaning that I've never seen it before, but based on the direction, the size, the slant, etc. And so a lot of people get frustrated because, you know, there's this crazy stroke they see in their signature and someone should know a meaning. But we only know meanings if we've seen it hundreds of times and categorized it and it kind of came into the lexicon of what that is. If you look at Kennedy's writing, there's not a lot of letters with lower zones, so there's not a lot of Ys. I've seen his writing where he's got Gs and Ys and they're very, very fluid like figure eights. So I don't know that the absence of Ys is as much relevant because we don't have a lot of handwriting. However, the few downstrokes we do see have a lot of determination, especially in the D's and these strokes like right here.
But
see
we
this?
have a big one, that big Y in Kennedy in the signature.
Right, and it's really odd because it's down with a cross, which is very odd. There's no particular meaning about that, but any of these long downstrokes is determination and independence. So, and then we've got the argumentativeness and the P, and like there's lots of good stuff here. And if you start stacking the traits together, you're like, oh, look at this fast thinker, and then you've got this, you know, resentment, and you got the big loop in the D. There's a lot of stuff we could spend hours on doing it, which is great. But the upper zone is a fascination with ideas, religion, philosophy, politics. It's cerebral. If you look at Deepak Chopra, if you look at, I think the Dalai Lama, but you have to correct me on that there are a lot of signatures of people that are basically spiritually focused, and their signatures have very little middle zone, and they're all upper zone. If you take the opposite of that, and if you guys have seen my early work, the big fluffy bimbo handwriting, I know that's terribly insulting, so I never say that word anymore. In fact, I don't know who said that. I don't do that anymore. That would be very politically inappropriate to say that. But that is someone living in the moment. So they are not thinking about death. They're not thinking about politics. They're thinking about what party is to go clubbing tonight. And so you get that 15 to 25-year-old, bubbly writing, and that is all they're thinking about. Now, some people never outgrow that, and I've seen that, but most people do. And so to think about the opposite is like this big in the moment, live in the moment versus Deepak Chopra's and people that are, constantly meditating. They have a very different focus. One's in the present, one's in the future. Does that make sense? And so that's how you reconcile that. That's sort of theory. But when you think about it, the theory helps you understand the primary traits. So the primary traits of sex are in the lower zone, the perversions or bisexuality or trust, all those in the lower zones. If you take the sort of aggressive stroke, which is basically, you see this in the P, that is argumentative. That's a primary stroke. But it's because it's aggressive in the lower zone. That's why it's argumentative. Aggressiveness in the Y is physically aggressive. Aggressiveness in the middle zone is what we see argumentative. Aggressiveness in the upper zone is basically an anger at religion. So it's a similar stroke. It's just moved around. And those of you in the advanced course, you're seeing that these strokes, like these angles and knives and roundedness, nurturing quality, they're just splattered at different parts of the writing, different zones, and they give it a slightly different connotation or different word for it. But really, it's about shapes and figures. And so I know that's a little bit gestalt, but we have to bring in the holistic with the primary traits as you move forward, because you'll be better at it. And that's the thing. It's better to learn the primary strokes and then start kind of backing into the theory, because if you start with theory too much, it seems too general. And so for those of you the beginners, stick with the primary strokes and the grapho deck and those primary cards. You'll boost your confidence because you'll be correct. And as you begin to see patterns, especially holistic patterns, you begin to be a better analyst all around.